Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new Oyasumi Hologram record 3, though it's spelled with 3 dots, like an ellipsis. I'm here at my mom's house watching her dog for the weekend, and since this is the internet, I figured I should show the dog. So this is Sophie. This is my mom's dog. Isn't she adorable? But yes, Oyasumi Hologram. This is their, as you might guess from the title, third release. And I have not been a fan of theirs in the past. They are part of this, I guess tangentially a part of this current movement of anti-idols, which are not really anti-idol at all. I think it's actually a pretty bad name for them, but maybe like alternative idol would be better. They're basically just idols who in some way appear not to be following idol tradition. They're oftentimes kind of punky or somehow associated with music that is not typically associated with idols, like noise or punk or metal, though I would not call baby metal an idol group if that's what you're thinking. More like Necronom Idol. And this whole anti-idol thing is not something I've been a fan of since its inception. All these groups just impersonate other bands that are better than them, and the only thing that they have to offer that the band they're impersonating doesn't is cute young girls who are all single because they have to be, or else you might not pay as much attention to them. And Oyasumi Hologram is no different. The kind of genre niche that they occupy is indie rock and kind of indie electronica. You can think of them as like a somewhat idly version of like Have a Nice Day, if you're familiar with that band, or maybe like a watered down Emerald 4 that's less interesting. And needless to say at this point, I think, I was not expecting much from this album, but I heard that it was a lot better than all their previous output and that this was their best stuff by far. And I wanted to kind of approach this with a mindset of like trying to understand why people get so into this. Like, is it just that they're cute girls? Or is there something more to the music to be understood? And frankly, I'm baffled. This song kicks off with the track Fairy Tale, which is a ballad, I guess. It has like piano and this like kind of spacey bed of electronics that it sits inside of. It's a little bit shoegazy with how kind of reverbed out and spacey everything is. The instrumental is really simple and stripped back. There's really not much to it, so much so that I almost feel like this was just made in like 15 minutes in FL Studio or by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Like, it's incredibly simple and it lacks any sort of personality. And so I kind of am looking for that gap to be filled by the vocals. But unfortunately, the vocals come in and they're kind of off key and their tone is really weak and they just don't have much presence or emotion in their voices at all. And I just don't understand how anybody could like this. Like, the song progresses at a slow pace. It's just under 4 minutes, but it feels like an hour. And the song sounds amateurish. And that's intentional, and I get that. Like, that's part of the charm, is that these things kind of sound indie and a little undercooked. And that definitely comes across. There's a very lo-fi recording on the vocals, and everything sounds pretty stripped back and bare bones. And the vocals are kind of off key and not very good, and that's once again meant to be kind of part of the charm. But in other bands that I listen to that have kind of amateurish vocals, what makes up for their lack of skill is the amount of like passion and personality and emotion that they put forward across their music. But these vocals are not only amateurish, but also devoid of any personality at all. Same with the instrumental. If this song is any sort of glimpse into either of these girls' personalities, then they are the most boring people I could imagine ever talking to. And unfortunately, this is the norm for the whole album from here on out. We then skip to Mahiru no Dance, which is track 2, and is actually my favorite track on the album. The song's a little bit more upbeat, a little more dancey, though it's still fairly kind of chilled out and slow. We get that same kind of bed of synth pad presets that permeate the whole album. There's a pretty simple kind of bare bones bass and drum loop. The vocals are decent. This is one of the better vocal performances on the album. And the chorus is actually fairly catchy. I like the vocal harmonies that come up on the chorus, though I'm not sure if they're intentional or if they're just by chance of if you try singing together enough times, you'll eventually hit something nice. But unfortunately, the rest of the song is pretty generic and boring. The verse is simply a backdrop that you have to pass through in order to get to the chorus, which is the enjoyable part of the song. And remember, this is my favorite track on the album. The next song, Planet, is one of the longer songs on the album at over 5 minutes, and it feels like torture. It starts off with this simple piano chord progression, which is literally just this on the keyboard. And then the vocals come in, and they're really nothing special. And they're shortly followed by the same kind of wave of reverby, like spacey synthesizers that wash over the song and drown any sort of uniqueness that this song had. About halfway through the track, the drums and bass get a little trap flavored, which was a little bit of a twist, I guess. It came as a little surprise. But it's really probably the most boring and just generic and passionless song on this whole boring and generic and passionless album. We're going to skip ahead to track 5, Sister, which is a little instrumental track. It's like 2 minutes long, and it's kind of a soundscape, but it's a soundscape that appears to be written by somebody who doesn't know what makes a soundscape good. All this song is a bunch of random synthesizer presets that are all kind of echoey and reverby and spacey, all just kind of layered on top of each other with no real order to them, and there's no dynamics to the song at all. The song doesn't rise and fall. There's not a building of tension and then release. There's not any sort of play with texture, really. The only texture you get is the texture of all these synthesizers clashing with one another. This track really comes off as kind of pointless. It feels like it was just put here in order to have a kind of weird, artsy, spacey soundscape piece. But it's really devoid of any artsiness. But then, for a little upturn, I'm going to skip to the last track, Empty Page, which is surprisingly a decent song. It starts off with this little metronome ticking away, and then these chords of like synthesized flutes come in, and they actually sound pretty nice. They're not a sound that's shown up on the album prior to this, and it actually like works out pretty well. It's got a nice sound to it. We then get more of that same piano that's been plaguing us through the whole album that I'm honestly getting a little tired of at this point, but I'll take what I can get with the flutes. The song starts to make it clear to the listener that this is a ballad, as it's very slow and kind of soft, and the vocals are somewhat somber. And as it progresses, it actually starts to kind of build in a direction. It seems to have some sort of motion to it. These plucked violins that I assume are a sample or synthesized come in and start playing this kind of plinky little arpeggiated melody. And overall, I just kind of like the sonic qualities of this song in comparison with all of the kind of dreary synthesizers that we were hearing before. This one actually sounds kind of nice. And as the song builds, it eventually climaxes pretty nicely, and the drums get a lot bigger, and it hits right as the vocals are kind of hitting their climax as well. And this is also one of the better vocal performances on the record. While I do think that this song is a bit long and kind of drags on in the beginning part, especially, the ending climax is really nice, and it plays the song out really well. And it has some really nice melodic parts to it for the vocals. It is still very stripped back and kind of simple and minimal in the instrumental department, but there seems to be actually some thought behind what the instrumental is doing. And the song actually has some motion to it. It's got a goal and a destination, and it kind of guides you on a short journey to get there, as opposed to many of the other tracks, which just kind of spin in circles and don't really move anywhere. And then that's the end of the album. It's a decent ending, especially when compared with all of the not so decent songs that came before it. But overall, this album did definitely exceed my expectations by not being 100% horrible from front to back. I'm feeling a 5 out of 10 on this thing. It just needs better songwriting, really. Like, I can handle the vocals. Like, if the vocals was all that it was, and there were some decent songs written on here with, like, some actual movement and some dynamics to them, I could get behind this album. But everything is just so stagnant and boring. This album almost feels like 30 minutes of nothing, and not in the weird kind of John Cage 433 kind of way. But that's me. New Oyasumi Hologram record. It's called 3 spelled ... though. And it's not very good. It's not very good. Peace.